For my final project, I chose to examine the relationship between immigrant social mobility and its impacts on environmental injustice in places like France and the United States specifically. In the next few slides, I will define what environmental injustice means, the communities that have been impacted, and some solutions that may help curb the injustices that are seen, and then also how we can track the progress that is made. PubMed defines environmental injustice as the inequitable and disproportionately heavy exposure of poor, minority, and disenfranchised populations to toxic chemicals and other environmental hazards. Environmental injustice contributes to disparities in health status across populations of differing ethnicity, race, and socioeconomic status. Infants and children, because of their unique biological vulnerabilities and age-related patterns of exposure, are especially vulnerable to the health impacts of environmental justice. Environmental injustice leads to increased health risks, social inequality, reduced life expectancy. In places like United States and France, immigrant communities are disproportionately more likely to be victims of environmental injustice. I chose to cover the suburban areas of France, also known as banlieues, because these communities face disproportionate amounts of pollution from the proximity to hazard waste and lack of green space, because most of the infrastructure of the housing that was built after World War II does not have adequate systems of heating or cooling. I also chose to focus on the California Central Valley because this area is widely known for their agricultural work and workers, and a large population of immigrants. Knowing the amount of pesticides in the air and allowing them to linger in these communities that these workers live in is irresponsible. Some solutions that I think may help these communities would be things like reducing exposure to pollution where people live, specifically in the Central Valley, keeping pesticides from being spread at a certain distance from where people live, and in France, to build affordable housing in healthier areas, restricting the use of pesticides and harmful chemicals near any housing developments. Another way is to invest in green space for communities. On a large scale, legislation that specifies how many trees per capita can be planted to deflect the pollution in the air and providing oxygen. Individuals can band together to plant a certain amount of trees in their communities on a smaller scale or an individual scale. Building green spaces like parks will allocate the land solely to the community rather than the industrialization or urbanization of the land. And lastly, I think it would be important to educate these populations, adding curriculum based around social injustice and environmental injustice and how individuals can curb the impact in their direct communities, and also by having media accountability. We've seen so many movements on social media recently. A way to track the progression of these solutions would be in places with a large amount of chemical and pesticide uses to check how much smog is in the air and the quality of air that's in the area, and then also in France to observe heat and shade because the French communities are more likely to be affected by these factors, and improper cooling techniques due to infrastructure. Investing in green spaces, these investments will directly counter the history of investments. You can track how these investments have impacted the quality of life for residents, including their mental health or things like noise pollution, because more trees and livestock will cushion the noise, And then this also ties into mutual reliance and also the idea of shared goals, by giving the community something to have together. And then lastly, in education, this can be tracked simply by online visibility of the problem, also tying into global knowledge. Lastly, at these green spaces, there can be events that offer resources and opportunities, for knowledge. And then these are my citations. Thank you.